As the dawn of the new millennium approached, the world would start to see a trend of films that would become very mainstream. These types of movies are action horror video game adaptations. As stated in our previous video, there have been a number of different ones, but nothing stood out more than Resident Evil. In 2002, we were graced with the first in the series. It may not have been the critics' favorite, but it did well enough at the box office to spawn a sequel. The name of that sequel is Resident Evil Apocalypse. With a title that big, you would think the filmmakers went for bigger, better, and more destructive, right? For the most part, yes, and they even packed in some surprises for fans of the series. So today, on Horror Revisited, we ask that you suit up and strap in for Alice's second go-around in Resident Evil Apocalypse.
GTA motherfucker! Oh, yeah! 10 points!
Nice hearing from you, Carlos.
So let's begin in 2002. The first film just became a hit financially. Sony Pictures wants to make a second one. So what was needed to make that happen? Well, Paul W.S. Anderson, the director of the first film, immediately started writing the sequel. He wanted to incorporate more elements of the games. So with that, we were introduced to Jill Valentine. She has played an important character to the series. Plus, it was time to start seeing more women kicking butt on screen. Am I right? Milla Jovovich confirmed early on that she would return if the first film was successful. Since this was the case, she would be the only character from the first film to return. But we'll talk more about that later.
We need to find somewhere to stop for a moment. I don't think that's a good idea.
Talks about what the plot would center around would involve Raccoon City, as well as the introduction of the Nemesis character. In the video game series, Nemesis first appears in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. It is a bioengineered weapon that was developed by the Umbrella Corporation as part of their Tyrant project. Nemesis is a powerful and relentless creature, and its primary objective is to eliminate any remaining members of the Special Forces Unit STARS, short for Special Tactics and Rescue Service. In the film, that's the only word that the creature even utters. And wouldn't you know it, Jill Valentine is the leading protagonist. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was the basis for the movie, with some elements from Resident Evil 2 as well being used. Anderson would also include parts from Escape from New York and the Omega Man to help build the plot. Early on, the title was called Resident Evil Nemesis. However, in 2002, Paramount would also release a movie called Star Trek Nemesis, to both critical and box office failure. Sony didn't want the same fate or to have that same title, so the film was changed to Resident Evil Apocalypse. The movie was officially greenlit in mid-2002, but would lose Paul W.S. Anderson as director. He had prior commitments to Alien vs. Predator, but would stay on as a screenwriter and producer. So Sony would have to look for another person to helm the film. In came Alexander Witt, who would also be making his directorial debut. After reading the script, Witt made some suggestions to Anderson and producer Jeremy Boll, who would alter the script slightly.
I've never shot a gun before.
There's nothing to it.
Try to hit him in the head.
As mentioned before, Milla was the only person to reprise her role, even though we see Eric Mabius' character Matt pulled off by Umbrella scientists in the end of the first film. Eric Mabius unfortunately wouldn't return. Matt's character is turned into Nemesis, but was portrayed by Matthew G. Taylor in real life. They do show Matt in flashback scenes in the beginning of the film. Since Jill Valentine was going to be a big part of this movie, Anderson had considered Natasha Henstridge. She was unfortunately unavailable. Mia Servino was also offered the role, but would decline. Eventually, Sienna Guillory was chosen for the role. To prepare for the role, Sienna bought a PlayStation 1 as well as a copy of Resident Evil 3 and studied for Jill Valentine. She would also base her movements on Jill by watching how she moved in the game. Talk about dedication. The character of LJ was written specifically for Snoop Dogg, but he would also drop out of production. So Mike Epps would take over the role, and it was rewritten to suit his personality. Other notable actors who were hired include Oded Fair, Thomas Kretschmann, Ian Glenn, and Jared Harris. Executive producer Robert Kolzer, who was the head of production at Constantine Film, had this to say about the production. Quote, "The second one, for me, is much more fun than the first. We wanted to give the movie a slightly different tone. When I see the first one now, it's very much about the terror of claustrophobia and the music blaring and the sound effects really loud. It's more of an adrenaline rush type movie. So we thought we should try to have a little bit more fun." End quote.
No, don't shoot them!
I'm leaving town. I suggest you do the same.
plot of the film follows the aftermath of the T-virus outbreak in Raccoon City, focusing on Alice, who is a former Umbrella Corporation operative, and a group of survivors, including Jill Valentine and Carlos Oliveira. As they navigate through the chaos of the city, overrun by zombies and mutated creatures, they uncover Umbrella's plans to contain the outbreak by destroying the city. The survivors must evade both the undead and Umbrella's forces, including the relentless Nemesis bioweapon, as they seek a way to escape Raccoon City before it is obliterated by a nuclear strike.
A tragic accident.
Not even Umbrella's capable of this.
Production for Resident Evil Apocalypse began in 2003 in both Ontario as well as Toronto, Canada. Toronto, as well as its surrounding suburbs, stood in for Raccoon City. 47 locations were used for filming, as well as several city blocks that would have to be shut down. The Prince Edward Viaduct Bridge was closed for 3 days, so scenes could be filmed on it. So Mila and Matthew Taylor would spend several hours daily for 6 weeks practicing for Alice and Nemesis' showdown. It was going to be a much bigger action set piece than what was seen in the film. Eventually, it was shot in an open space outside Toronto City Hall because of a decision made by Witt. Because of his commitments to Alien vs. Predator, Paul W.S. Anderson only appeared on set for a couple of days. He would communicate often through email with Witt about dialogue choices and production changes during filming. In the end, Anderson would go on record saying he was very critical of Alexander Witt's work. Christian Sebald and Derek Rogers were hired as DPs on the film. They prominently display a bunch of shaky action for the audience that at times feels difficult to follow what is happening, but I digress. During production, the film was threatened with a complete shutdown when there was a SARS outbreak in Toronto. Ultimately, this didn't affect the production, as filming concluded in October of that same year.
We can help you.
There's no going back.
No!
There were tons of special effects used in the film, including green screen, CGI, as well as scale models and wire removal. Nemesis was created with a costume and only had CGI elements in his eye. Despite the actor Matthew Taylor being tall at 6'7", aspect ratios were still added to make him appear 10 to 20% larger on screen. The Lickers would also come back for the sequel, this time looking slightly more realistic. They were completely CGI because the effects team wasn't happy with some of the animatronics that were created. Core Digital Pictures would animate the Lickers and described it as the most challenging special effect that they had created for the film. They were responsible for creating over 250 special effects for the film. This included superimposing Mila's face on a stunt double. Mila performed most of her stunts on screen, but her insurance company wouldn't allow her to attempt several dangerous ones. I know, you might be thinking of recent films such as Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny or The Irishman in regards to superimposed faces and the bad taste they left in people's mouths. But hear me out, it looks pretty good here. Frantic Films was hired to create 78 special effects, like muzzle flashes and slow motion effects, whereas Mr. X Inc. was hired to create the destruction of Toronto City Hall, which took 4 months to do so. Color was heavily worked on this film in post-production to give it a darker look overall and enhance brightness of blood and gore. Alice and Jill were also given some modifications on their skin and redness of lips, to over-sexualize female heroines. For any fan of the first film, you were ready to hear some hardcore electronic score created by Marilyn Manson and Marco Beltrami, right? Unfortunately, neither came back to score the production. Instead, we were treated to composer Jeff Dana, who would conduct the London Philharmonia Orchestra. At the time of its release in 2004, it was met with mixed reaction. While some loved its orchestral and electronic styles, others would complain it needed more thematic development as well as variation.
You really thought I didn't know?
So the time would come for promotion and distribution of the film. The marketing team hired director Marcus Nispel to create a different teaser trailer called Regenerate. The teaser promoted skin rejuvenation by the Umbrella Corporation. As the teaser proceeds, you notice a woman holding the virus, and she eventually turns into a zombie. In May 2004, the teaser made history and was downloaded 8.5 million times from the film's website. To this day, I consider it to be one of the best teaser trailers ever created for a film. Screen Gems, who distributed the first Resident Evil film as well, went as far as creating a fake newspaper called the Raccoon City Times for promotion. At the time, my 14-year-old self was so hyped for this movie.
Some side effects may occur.
Resident Evil Apocalypse was released on September 10th, 2004. It opened in first place over newcomer Cellular and knocked Jet Li's film Hero down to fourth place. It would open to over $23 million. It would also open to number one in other regions such as Hong Kong, Singapore, the Philippines, Mexico, and Malaysia. It would go on to gross over $51 million domestically and $129 million worldwide, on a budget consisting of $45 million. As successful as the film was at the box office, it would get some scathing reviews by critics. It currently sits at a 19% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the critical consensus being Resident Evil Apocalypse has lots of action, but not much in terms of plot or creativity. It also sits as the lowest rated film in the entire series. Leonard Maltin called the film a bomb, as well as a tiresome sequel that ended up playing more like a remake. Roger Ebert was the most boisterous of all. He was so disgusted by the film that he refused to review any more upcoming films in the series. His review said, quote, "The movie is an utterly meaningless waste of time. Parents, if you encounter teenagers who say they like this movie, do not let them date your children," end quote. While critics loathed it, audience members thought it was a standard sequel with, yes, more action, but less story. Milla Jovovich has stated that she was disappointed by the film, stating that the studio wanted more action and explosions, whereas the story was swept under the rug. In 2009, Time would rank this film as one of the top 10 worst video game films.
I see you, mother.
So let's take that bad taste out of our mouths and discuss some positives. There are a handful of impressive scenes in this film, but my absolute favorite thing about it has to be the introduction of Jill Valentine. Paul W.S. Anderson wrote her incredibly well. Since the introduction of Michelle Rodriguez was short-lived, it was nice to see Alice play off of a second female lead who actually lasted in the film series. Jill not only portrayed the same clothing-wise, but she comes off as resourceful and adaptable. Her unwavering resolve to survive and protect others drives her actions throughout the film. She is strong, capable, and morally driven, which reinforce her status as a fan favorite from the video game series. I love the opening scenes of this film because you see Raccoon City become overrun by zombies from the T-virus outbreak. This intense sequence sets the tone for the rest of the film and immediately immerses you in the post-apocalyptic world. Another scene that feels like something straight out of the video games is the church scene. It not only introduces us to more of the Lickers, but is a great scene. In it, Jill and other survivors take refuge in a church, only to find themselves surrounded by the undead. Alice comes crashing in, like a badass, on a motorcycle, and what follows is an intense and adrenaline-fueled battle as the group fights for their lives against waves of undead creatures.
Who the f are you?
As stated prior, Nemesis is one of the most iconic villains in the video game series, and to see Jill and Alice have a showdown against him is one of the biggest highlights of the movie and showcases some intense action and suspense. Resident Evil Apocalypse was released on DVD and VHS in December 28, 2004. It just missed the mark of making it a stocking stuffer for Christmas alongside Anchorman.
The death-defying action thriller is resurrected in a 2-disc special edition DVD loaded with over 6 hours of special features. Milla Jovovich, Resident Evil Apocalypse. Own it on DVD December 28th.
The DVD included 3 audio commentaries, 20 deleted scenes, several featurettes, and even a blooper reel. Guess it wasn't such a terrible production set to be on. In 2007, it would be released on Blu-ray, importing over all the special features, and was met with high remarks on video and audio presentation. Since then, it has been released multiple times in different collections for the series.
Killing me won't put things right.
No! But it's a start!
I was 14 when Apocalypse hit theaters. While I didn't think it was as good as the first, I still thought it was a pretty fun action movie, and believe that most critics just don't know how to turn their brain off and enjoy themselves. It stays true to the tone and atmosphere of the video game series that us fans of the franchise have come to expect. I think it features well-developed characters and an iconic villain. While the action is ramped up here, it can be at times hard to see. Also, I dare you to prove me wrong and point out whenever an action scene is taking place if a shot lasts more than 3 seconds. The film is never boring, full of entertaining moments, and has a shorter runtime of 94 minutes. Now, saying that a film is 94 minutes in this day and age is nothing short of a miracle, seeing as average runtimes of movies are over 2 hours. So I guess you can thank the filmmakers for that.
Let's see how good they really are.
In conclusion, while it doesn't deliver the goods as well as the first film, Resident Evil Apocalypse is a thrilling and action-packed sequel that provides some intense combat sequences, albeit choppily put together, suspenseful moments, and a deeper exploration of the post-apocalyptic world established in the first film. While it doesn't flesh out as worthy of a story, it successfully translates the atmosphere and elements of the popular video game series onto the big screen, captivating audiences with its blend of horror, action, and intrigue. So we can't end this episode without talking about the series' future endeavors. Since Apocalypse was so successful, a sequel was greenlit in 2005. It was released in theaters in 2007 under the title Resident Evil Extinction. Many, including myself, think this is one of, if not the best film in the series, and took everything from both the first and second films to create a truly fun experience for its viewers. So how about it? Would you like to see us cover Extinction? If so, make sure to leave a comment below.
My name is Alice. And I remember everything.